How's everybody? Everybody good?
Yeah, doing good.
Everybody's
Good
good.
to see y'all. Hope you had a good vacation. Y'all just been loafing, I know. Got nothing to do. Kind of like me. All right. Well, welcome back. Let's look at our weekly schedule and see where we are. But I tell you, we're in the short rows now. I'm like the old mule. I turn heading toward home, I get faster. Oh, let me share the screen. Let's see where we are on our weekly schedule. We're at week number 8. So we've got 3 more after tonight, and 2 of them are case studies. So we'll start out with the case study, and then we'll talk about our stars of the week. So our case study, keep trying to call me. I think it's numbers I'm blocking, I hope, anyway. Let's see. Yeah, it is. Let me just turn it down. Fix that problem. The case study. Now, what I need for you to know about the case study. Don't get personally involved or thrown off by Jimmy and Willie's classification as being gay kids. This case is really bigger than that. This is about any federally protected class of kids. Now, what federal law protects these kids? 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, number 1, Civil Rights Act, number 2, and number 3, Title IX. So these are Title IX kids. All right, what if these were EC kids? Could we ban them from coming to the prom because they're EC? Well, of course not. Any of your federal, that's why we had you start. Very first thing you did this semester was identify your special POPs, your federal programs. Why? Because they have extra federal protections. Just like when we talk about discipline in a few minutes, EC kids have extra protections because they're a federally protected class of kids. So you've got to understand, Jimmy and Willie have protections, not only the 14th Amendment, Civil Rights Act, but they also have Title IX that forbids you from discriminating against them because of their sexual orientation. Now, doesn't matter to me how you feel one way or the other, but understanding, school administration, our job is to follow law and policy. And so that's what this case is really about, law and policy, not about their orientation. They are a federally protected class. I could have picked any of them. This one just happens to be, the one that I picked because there's some other things in here that I really need for you to know. All right. There's a FERPA violation in this one. You say, well, wait a minute, Dale. There's no EC kids involved. Federally protected class. FERPA, privacy of educational records. Aren't these a federally protected class? Absolutely they are. FERPA extends to them as well. See, we too narrowly define some of these statutes. We only talk about FERPA when we're talking about EC kids. Can we talk to anybody else's parents about somebody else's kids, especially if they're federally protected class? It's not a good idea anytime. But these kids have FERPA protection as well because they're federally protected. So when Cindy and her husband, whatever his name is, from Jerry and Cindy Hudson, wanting to talk about Jimmy and Willie, can she talk about Jimmy and Willie? Of course not. So this case brings out a good point. Again, I'm on federally protected classes, FERPA violation here. All right. Heckler's veto. You'll read about that in your text. What is heckler's veto? That's basically when you let the loudest, stupidest, and meanest have their way. Shouts down everybody else. You got to be careful of that. And then the other thing is veil threats. Veil threats really bother me. In that too many times principals, under the guise of looking out for kids, in order to get what they want, they couch it under the terms of, well, I'm just doing what's best for you. No, you're doing what's best for yourself. And what you're basically doing is threatening teachers and kids. That's become a go-to move, especially lately. One of your classmates in the other section, she texted me a while ago on the way in that she had gotten the job. She was so excited, but she couldn't believe that her principal is threatening to hold her until September. You know, I can, because that's become the go-to move. Is we'll make people do what we want them to. We'll make them work for what we want to pay them. We'll make them work under the conditions. That's become the go-to move now for too many school administrators, that using the veiled threats against students and staff to get what they want, to expedite them. Central office people are terrible about using it. Principals, oh, I wish you hadn't reported that. We should have handled that in-house. That'll be bad PR. I'm not sacrificing my career for yours so you don't look bad because you're trying to be the superintendent somewhere. You're an area superintendent. You don't want anything bad to happen on your watch. I'm not sacrificing my career for you. They've become that, so that they use that veiled threat of bad publicity. Oh, we needed to handle that in-house. You're not a team. You're not being a team player. I'm hearing principals all over talking about that now, that they're caught between a rock and a hard place of following through and reporting these things and doing the things they're supposed to be doing, and this political pressure from above them with these veiled threats of you're not a team player. And so I need for you to fully understand heckler's veto. We can't let the loudest and stupidest and meanest, most aggressive. I'm amazed at how many people walk into schools nowadays and they start out with, I'm not a, fill in the blank, I'm not a racist, misogynist, I'm not a bigot, I'm not, and then they go on to say the most racist, misogynist, bigoted things you've ever heard. Threatening, loud and stupid. That's heckler's veto. The public has become, our discourse has become horrendously bad. You got to learn what that is and how to deal with it. You need to understand veiled threats, how not to get caught up in that yourself, and recognize it when others are doing it to you. And you need to understand the protections that federally protected classes of kids have that extend beyond the normal protections that kids have. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument that whether they should have those or not. They do. The laws and the policies are on the books. Your job is to follow law and policy. Now, I'll just tell you, just like the clerk of court in Kentucky, oh, her tribe was boosting her up for not issuing a marriage license to the same-sex couple. Oh, you go, girl. They was boosting her up until she got sued. They were nowhere to be found when she lost everything she owned. They were nowhere to be found. So that's what I'm talking about. You can't let the loudest and stupidest intimidate you into breaking the law. And people will do that nowadays on a daily basis. That's become the standard. I'll go in and scream and yell and demand, and I'll get what I want. And remember, you're sacrificing your career if you break law and policy. You'll lose your house. This is an excellent case for all those points. So make sure that you bring those out in your presentation. All right, let's look at So let's look at back to our weekly schedule. All right, so this week you were to interview an assistant principal or other school disciplinarian. What were their biggest concerns about process and disciplinary incidents? Observe a due process, report back what surprised you. So here are our stars of the week. We'll start out with Dr. Mary there. She did a really good job with her response. And she did a good analogy with her case study. Of course, you don't get to read reflections, but what I really like, I want to bring that up too, because it happens with disciplinary instance. She related what happened in our second case study with the superintendent to a God complex. I can do whatever I want. Unfortunately, that's an excellent analogy. That's excellent metaphor for that case study, Mary, by the way. But why I wanted to bring that in tonight, unfortunately, the administrators do the same thing with school discipline. I see it more in school discipline than anything else. They have a guy, because I said so. Every decision from assistant principal to area superintendent to assistant superintendent to superintendent to board can be appealed finally to court. You've got to understand, you just can't play God when you're doing discipline. You must follow the policies, the handbook. And we're going to talk about, there's some additional steps that you have to do for exceptional children. There's some additional steps you have to do when you're suspending kids or sending them to alternatives. There's some additional due process that's out there. And too many times, school administrators, just like that superintendent, have that God complex. I can do what I want. No, you can't. You need to know that. So that's a good one, Mary. Rebecca pointed out, she's in last night's group, that a lot of our problems with discipline, teachers don't know how to write referrals. They don't know how to actively supervise. That they're out on the playground, but they're on their phones or they're talking in groups. And a lot of our problems, we get inundated. Rebecca was talking about her AP said, a lot of the problems that they had to deal with stem from teachers' lack of supervision and not writing good referrals. Jessica brought up a point. She didn't call it this, but it's in the CMS handbook. In CMS, we called it a safe harbor provision, where a kid could turn in something they weren't supposed to bring to school without penalty if they brought it before anybody else found out about it. That's a good one. You need to make sure you use that. David pointed out, David's with us tonight, that we really need to be doing PD for young teachers on how to do discipline, classroom management, and how to write referrals. Again, that's what those teacher work days are for. They don't have any vacation days, annual leave days. You got them there. Don't just send them down to the room and neglect them. That's when you could be working with them on that, because I'll bet you the majority of referrals are written by young teachers in most schools. Go to the root of the problem. One of the things that he also brought up, one of the reasons why our go-to move is suspension is because interventions require personnel and time. We're going to look at a handbook in a minute with all the different levels of intervention at the first level, first tier of consequences. There's a lot of different things, but a lot of them require time. And so it becomes easy just to suspend kids. That ought to be because we know about the school to prison pipeline. We talked about that in our very first case study, that school to prison pipeline, that we know kids being out of school is the worst thing we can do to them. But we don't do interventions because it takes time, effort, energy, personnel. Leanne pointed out that discipline is more difficult with EC and 504, and we're going to talk about that. There's more steps in due process. Absolutely, there is. Let's see. Mandy talked about that. Terrence mentioned persons responsible. I like that. Olivia talked about with discussion board 6, students posting to social media at an accident. You have to control that. Shakita made a good point. Before you discipline any kid, you ought to check to make sure that they don't have an IEP, a PEP, a BEP, any of those things, a behavior intervention plan, a personal education plan for AIG, a PEP if they're 504, an IEP if they're EC. You need to check. And Lakeitha backed that up with, you need to speak with other administrators and counselors. You need to make sure that you don't violate one of these kids. Remember the butt and seat rule. If you change their butt from their seat, that's one of your days. And so Rebecca talked about that discussion board 6. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Take pictures at the scene and help with crowd control. That's a good idea as well. But back to discipline. I want to start out tonight. Okay, who's our expert tonight? Who's an EC teacher? There she is. I'm looking right at her. All right. Jessica, I need you to help me. You're the expert. I'm old. I forget stuff. Didn't know a lot to begin with. You've got 10 days to deal with an EC kid. After 10 days, you've got to do a manifestation determination. We're going to talk about all the different roles of that in just a minute. But remember, there's a caveat. The third time a kid displays the same type of behavior, he goes to the front of the line, especially if it's a violent or aggressive behavior, because other kids might get hurt. What will happen to you if a parent finds out their child gets hurt by an EC kid, and they find out that this is the third or fourth time that this has happened, and all you've done is you haven't done anything with this kid? You'll get sued for endangering their child, for negligence. You had a duty to act and you didn't. So the third time that a kid does the same thing, you move in front of the line. What is a manifestation termination? All right, manifestation termination is a system. First thing is a functional behavior assessment. If the kid does not have a behavior intervention plan, if up to now their disability was only academic, then you need to start the anecdotals and do a functional behavior assessment. If they have a behavior intervention plan, you make sure it's been updated and it's being followed through. So that's the first step in the manifestation. All right. Second is to update their IEP and update their psychological with the school psychologist. So we're looking at the behavior intervention plan, the functional behavior assessment, updated psychological, updated IEP. All those things need to be done. And again, if they don't have a behavior intervention plan, you need to start the functional behavior assessment. You've got 10 days to get this done. You can suspend these kids out of school for up to 10 days, pending their manifestation determination. All right, Jessica, it's time for you to help us out here. What happens if the kid manifests?
Well, first off, it depends on the IEP team if they decided that it was a part of the manifestation of their IEP.
Yeah, we're saying that the team, when they updated the IEP and they looked at all this stuff, they said, yep, this is a manifestation of his disability. What happens at that point?
You have to bring interventions and you have to help the child. They can't get suspended because of the issue that they're having.
What if they're on suspension? Do you have to bring them back?
It depends on if it was a violence, then they go home base. But at that point, they still get their services and they have teachers that will come out and serve them.
That is correct. You either have to bring them back or give them home base. If it's a manifestation, even if, but I suspended. I've got 10. No, you got 10 days. But if they manifest, it's over with. They have to start receiving services the very next day immediately. You got to be understanding that. See, I've had too many administrators that would say, well, you know, manifestation came back 3 days in, but we got 10 days. We can keep them out 7 more. No, you can't. No, you can't. But I get 10 days. No, you get 10 days. But if you manifest, that 10 days is over with. That 10 days is over with if the kid manifests. And now we're going to have a meeting to look at least restrictive environment, LRE. What is LRE? Jessica, help us out with least restrictive environment.
It is the environment the child is able to stay in and not impede not only their behavior, or their education, but others as well.
Yep. So we got to figure out if we've got the right placement for this kid. Why is it a lot of districts don't want to do homebound? Because it costs money. But there might be something else somewhere else for this kid. But we got to look at least restrictive environment if this kid manifests. If the kid doesn't manifest, then we can move on. All right. So we can move on with due process. All right. What is due process when we're looking at discipline? Well, I have a handy dandy guide for you right here. Let me share my screen. Look at there. All right. Substantive due process. Substance is what we're supposed to do, and procedural is did you do it? All right. Process must be announced, disciplinary manuals and district code of conduct, right to be informed of the charges, right to hear the evidence, witnesses against them, right to respond to charges, right to present witnesses, and right not to be treated arbitrarily or capriciously. All right. That's due process. All right. Now, So we can continue disciplining this kid if he doesn't manifest. However, on top of this, we've got to do the manifestation. If he doesn't manifest, we got to bring him back. If he does manifest, we can keep him out. Now, can we send him to an alternative school, Jessica?
If that's what is decided by the team, but it has to be their least restricted environment before you send them.
So we're saying that the least restrictive environment is going to be a one of our alternative schools. All right. What if our alternative school doesn't have an EC teacher? Can we still send him?
No, they have to get services.
Yay! Yay! I worked in a district I founded and opened and ran their first from the central office their first alternative school, and their idea was we're going to clean out all of our EC kids that are causing us problems. We don't have an EC teacher. Can't send them over here. You can do homebound, but you can't send them over here. You can only least restrictive environment doesn't mean that we're putting them over in an alternative school. If they don't have an EC teacher to deliver services, you can't send them. That's the biggest problem we have right there in schools is that we think we can put any kid, if they don't manifest, we can put them in alternative school. No, they're still EC. It doesn't change their EC status simply because they didn't manifest. They still have to have a teacher over there to deliver their services. All right, now, so this is due process for an exceptional child. I do manifestation, termination, functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention plan, the Deck 5 paperwork, updated psychological, updated IEP, manifest, no manifest, manifest, back to his, we look to see if this is the least restrictive environment. If he doesn't manifest, we can discipline him the same way. We can keep him out for his 10 days or whatever we've given him, but we can't send him to alternative school unless we have an EC teacher over there. That's the fly in the ointment there. Simply because the kid didn't manifest, that doesn't mean that he's not exceptional. It just means this behavior is not a part of his disability. That sounds like, I'm nitpicking, but I'm telling you that I can't tell you the number of folks that got caught up in that notion. Well, he didn't manifest. We sent him to no, they didn't have an EC teacher. Can't do that. And so school administrators and teachers don't like that, but that's the rules. That's how that goes. Now, let's shift gears here. One of the problems I had in CMS was not following proper due process once you decided you were going to suspend a regular ed kid out of school. There are additional due processes that they get. So, I'm guilty. I had it all put in the code of conduct for Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. So let's look at that. Now, if your district doesn't have this, you need to take this as your guide and ask people, what do we do? Right here, procedure for short-term suspensions, 1 to 10 days. Now, this, you can see there's more steps to this than that just regular due process. That's what I'm talking about. Again, notified of the charges. That's the same as the other. Have an informal hearing, be informed of the charges. It will typically occur immediately. Form may be delayed. Start of short-term students continue present is a safety concern. Make a decision. Notification. Report suspension in writing to the parent. Again, more steps if you're suspending a kid. Reasonable efforts to contact. And a couple other things. So there's some additional stuff. The problem that I was having is they weren't informing the parents. Parent didn't know the kid was suspended. They just sent a note home with the kid. Kid's not dumb. He's not handing the note to his parents. Due process has not been carried out then. All right. So now, if you're asking for more than 10 days, if you're doing 10 days with a recommendation for an alternative placement or a long-term suspension, look at here. Here's more due process things that you have to do. And I put them all in one handy dandy place. So due process, this is the substance of due process. There's just the basic for a regular ed kid, any disciplinary referral. Then it gets more involved when you start talking about suspending them out of school, short term, and even more when you decide to do 10 days and long-term recommendation. And even more if you're asking for an exclusion, a 365 for a gun. Even more if we're talking about reentry coming from an alternative or a locked facility, different. Again, more levels of due process that you've got to follow. Normally, when a kid comes out of a locked facility, that means prison, youth facility, a locked facility, they've got to transition back through your alternative school. But what if they're coming back? If they're transitioning from an alternative set, again, and then there's point of entry, point of exit. What is that? Well, you got to know that one. You send a kid to alternative school for 30 days. His parents said, we're not sending him over there. They kept him home for 30 days. And he comes back to your school 30 days later. No, he's still got to serve his 30 days before he can come back. You have to make sure that the parents know that. That's why we put all this in the code of conduct when we gave the parents a copy of it. So what they would do is we won't send our kid to alternative school. We'll just keep him home. Well, you keep him home as long as you want to. But he'll do that 30 days at the alternative school before he comes back to our school. That's the way that works. So the whole point here is regular due process, substantive procedural. There's, what I call due process light for just any regular one. Then it gets more involved for EC. It gets more involved with suspension. It gets more involved when you're doing long-term suspension. It gets more involved with alternative schools. Each level has more due process that you need to know. Now, again, people say, well, just because you worked in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, you use their manual. Well, and I wrote that manual, by the way, before I retired years ago. I had that section put in. That was the whole notion, is that I wanted in one place where parents could see it, kids could see it, that school administrators could see it, that there's additional levels of due process guaranteed to kids at each one of these continuing levels. There's more in there for each one of these kids. If your district doesn't have it all in one handy dandy place, you should use this one as a guide and find all that stuff out, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. That goes back to those levels of negligence. Had a duty to act and didn't. Nonfeasance. So therein lies your problem. Discipline is a lot more complex. You can't rush it. You can't shortcut it. It's more than just the initial short due process. It gets complicated with federal kids, EC 504. It gets complicated with them. It gets complicated with suspension, short-term, long-term recommendations for those things. It gets very complicated. Just like, again, when we talked about hiring, when we talked about personnel and hiring, the steps are the same everywhere. What varies is who does the steps. It's the same kind of thing. All these things are guaranteed, but you've got to know that. You've got to know what your role is in all these things. And again, I go back to the biggest offender, that the biggest amount of offenses I saw was not understanding butt and seat rule. That's kind of crude, but that's what I call it. Is anytime kid's butt's not in his regular seats, change of placement. It counts on your days. That's just hard and fast. If you understand that, you're a whole lot better. So it takes time. You got to know the rules. Some of your districts don't put all this stuff in the handbook. I hate that. But you got to know all the different additional steps at when each one of these special cases comes up, that you're supposed to know what the substance of the law is, and you're supposed to carry it out. That would be the procedure. All right. So let's look at again, this is sacrilegious, but let's look at the Bible. And here it is. Now, I fully acknowledge it's 168 pages long, and the writing is really small. But you got to know this thing from front to back. You have got to know this thing from front to back, because it also covers your alternative schools as well. It covers all that stuff. But again, everything has to be reported, everything, because we collect data for the Office of Civil Rights in Power School now as well. Now, we're going to undergo a name change, but it's still going to be the same system. But again, what you will see referenced in here, this is a handy dandy guide. You will see, this is law, 115C12 or 115C288. That's from the General Assembly. You'll also see State Board of Education, the State School Board. That's policy. What they've done is they put all the laws and policies in one place for you in terms of disciplining kids and reporting that discipline. They've also put your federal law in here too. This is from No Child Left Behind. These are the 9 acts of violence that count toward your persistently dangerous total. Remembering that No Child Left Behind from 2001 says 2 things. Kids don't have to go to low performing academic schools. They don't have to go to persistently dangerous schools. These are the 9 things that count against your persistently dangerous. These 9 things right here. You have to report these on yourself. If you have more than 2, more than, was it 1 for every 200 kids, 5 for every 1,000? It's basically a half of 1%. If you exceed that, you go on the watch list. Now, do you remember, you say, why you got that facilities on tonight's lesson? Do you remember that facilities checklist that I had you use earlier for your twice monthly? That checklist, the state will do that checklist when they come out if you're on the watch list as well. That's just an added bonus to turn the knife a little bit more on you. When you make that watch list, when you have too many of these incidents, they'll send a state auditor out in March of that year. At the end of the year, you exceeded your total of persistently dangerous incidents, and they tell you you're now on the persistently dangerous watch list. Not only if you exceed it 2 years in a row, we're going to declare you persistently dangerous and you lose your job as an administrative team, but we're coming in March to do an audit of, yes, Lakeitha, that's exactly right. 2 years, you exceed your total, you're out as a school administrator. But the caveat to that is it's first year. In March of the first year that you're on the watch list, they're going to come and do an audit. I developed that checklist for that twice monthly because having had to be in charge of that for a number of years, and I watched and walked around with the state auditor at the schools when I was in charge of that, and I figured out what she was going to ask and what she was looking for. And there was an old document, Super Safe School document, and she used that as the basis. And after about 4 years, I was able to figure out everything that she was going to be looking for. That's what's on that facilities inventory. They're going to come in March. And if you don't pass your audit, you don't get a second year. Let me say that again. If you pass your audit in March and your numbers are, your numbers are good at the end of that year, you'll come off. If your numbers are bad and you pass your audit, they'll give you a second year to try to get your numbers are down. But at the end of that first year, if your numbers are not any better and you failed your audit, you're out after 1 year. As school administrator, you're done. That's federal. That's federal law. You say, but Dale, it's just random. These things could happen to anybody. Well, here's my argument, folks. They're not random. If you understand the theory of antecedent behaviors, the little things become the big things. You will understand that you can do things to stop these big things from happening at your school. They are not random. If you have gang activity, and don't think about Bloods and Crips. Now I've heard they've got some new kid varieties. I mentioned the names of them last night in class of Bloods and Crips, but don't think about just traditional gangs. I'm going to show you the PowerPoint in just a minute. If you've got kids that act together for violent behavior, we classify that might be a hybrid or non-traditional gang, but you will definitely have drugs and weapons, and you will have assaultive behaviors. If you allow personal public displays of affection, you don't stop sexual harassment, you don't stop the sexting, the texting, you don't stop all that, the cyberbullying stuff, you will have sexual assault, sexual offenses. You'll have homicides and you will have suicides if you don't stop the sexting and texting stuff, the cyberbullying. Again, try not to throw my shoulder out, pat myself on the back. This is 14 years old. I did the state conference. I was the keynote at the big one at Curry. The year I retired. I spent a number of years putting this together with a criminologist. I hired one. Identification and antecedent behaviors and development prevention strategies assist schools in decreasing violent acts on their campuses. Why did I do that? We had a big problem in Charlotte-Mecklenburg with all these schools going on the persistently dangerous watch list, trying to get them off. It was a big problem. We had 12 1 year, 12. We made the mistake 1 year of allowing either you have to reconfigure the school, or that means fire the administrative team, or let the kids go somewhere else in the district and you have to bus them there. We tried that one time. That was a complete disaster. Parents chose to go all the way across the county to Ballantyne. Oh, it was just a complete disaster. We were having such a problem with this. And so I hired a criminologist. We started crunching the numbers, looking at things. And here are the things. Remember, this is 14 years old now. Here's the things we said lead to it from all the data that we collected, quantitative and qualitative, over a 4-year period of time. Gang activity, cyberbullying. Nobody even heard of cyberbullying at that time, 14 years ago. Sexual harassment and all the sexual stuff on phones. This is where it comes from, right here. And here's all the federal guidelines, all the documenting behind all this stuff. It's well documented, all the numbers, violence prevention. But here's what we're talking about. People don't understand. When we talk about gangs, it's not like there's a charter and there's rules and a national. So gangs come in all kind of different forms: traditional, non-traditional, hybrid, tiger, criminal enterprise, which are motorcycle gangs. There's all types. These are all stuff from Charlotte. Here's some of the ones that we locally that just, these kids get together and make this stuff up. But and there's different levels of involvement. Fantasy, fascination. You see a lot of kids in middle school form their own little gangs. They don't call them gangs, but generally there's drugs and weapons around those things, and violence. That's where you get that's where you get all that weapon and drug stuff. That's where you get all that assaultive behavior, assault with a weapon, assault with serious injury, beating kids in, all that kind of stuff. And so you have a lot of different levels of gang involvement that we don't think of as normally as gang related, but it is gang. You need to look at it that way. All this stuff that we gathered. This one right here, this is your pop quiz. You know what gang she's affiliated with? Can you see the colors? The 1313. What is that? MS-13, the color and the numbers, all these gang tattoos, all this stuff. If you allow gangs, flags, if you see all these markings on kids, if you allow this stuff in schools, you're going to have violence. It's just that simple. If you don't stop the phone use, the sexting, the texting, if you don't stop the cyberbullying, if you don't stop the sexting, texting stuff, and the public displays of affection, you're going to have sexual assault, sexual offenses. If you don't stop the cyberbullying and bullying, you're going to have murders and suicides. You're going to have violence or assaultive behaviors. The last 2 kids killed in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and the one at Albemarle High School was cyberbullying, and the kid walked up and just shot the other kid. Yeah. Suicides. How many suicides have we seen? Kids being cyberbullied. I'm telling you, you can stop this stuff if you understand antecedent behaviors. The little things become the big things. We talk about process and discipline. We need to be paying attention when the little stuff comes in and not just ignore it. We need to be spending time investigating, making sure that we do process, but that we're paying attention for what's going on. If we do that, we can stop some of these big things from happening in our building. I told you my job is to keep you from losing your house. You don't follow the law, you misspend the money, which is law, or you let your schools get out of control with violent behavior, they will remove you. Federal law says you're out. You may get 2 years. You may only get 1 if you don't pass that. If you don't pass your audit, which is that facility's audit, if you don't pass that, you're out when the state comes. Here's all the stuff on sexual harassment. This is a long one. It's 82 slides long. I'm not going to sit and read it to you, but this is research-based. I spent a ton of money in 4 years putting this together. And I think, and again, this is an ego thing from me, I think it's just as relevant today as when I presented this 14 years ago. I've updated it a little bit, but I haven't seen anything that's changed. And remember, Title IX has made it even more so about reporting and being involved in this with their latest updates from 2021. So back to our handbook. This handbook speaks to that. That's the first thing that jumps out to me is you better be working on those violent behaviors. Again, this is about keeping your house. So it's early in the book here. I mean, it's early in the book telling you that what that means is this will get you, folks. If you don't pay attention to this will get you. And Office of Civil Rights reporting. All this stuff goes into civil rights, and so you got to make sure that's federal law. That's why it's up front here. These are federal laws. No Child Left Behind is federal. OCR is federal. They're telling you up front. You got to, that they're going to get you on these if you got too many, and if you don't collect all this data and information for Office of Civil Rights. And then it refers back to right here. Elementary and Secondary Act of 65. We talked about that. That's where your titles come in. Your special ed programs, again, that's federal. What must be reported? Everything. You can see everything has to be reported. Everything. But what really exclusions, restraints, doesn't matter who does it. Principal is ultimately responsible. It tells you right there, has best practices. Now, this is the part that sounds so simple, but people have such a hard time. We report incidents, not outcomes. What does that mean? We just conferenced that kid. We didn't have to report what he did. That's not true. That's an outcome. That's a consequence. That has nothing to do with whether he did it or not. We have to report what happened, not as a result of what happened. Disciplinary data reporting is organized around incidents that occur at sites. But that person wasn't a student here. Doesn't matter. They have all kinds of offender types, about 15 different ones. Well, that happened when school was closed. That happened What does it say? Incidents that occur at this site. Does it matter if it happened on the night or weekend? No. Does it matter that it was just a member of the public? No. Does it matter that we didn't suspend the kid? No. Disciplinary data reporting is organized around incidents that occur at sites under the jurisdiction of the reporting school. Period. If you step outside of that, you'll lose your job. There are levels: persistently dangerous, violent crimes, PD. They have a prefix, PD. That counts against that total. It has the window when you got to put them in there, all those things. Here's all the reportable behaviors that you have to report to law enforcement and to the state. Guidelines, they have all these guidelines for you. They have examples in this handbook. Procedures for entering and submitting disciplinary data. All the procedures that you have to go through. Submitting data to DPI. Final approval Power School end of year. Expungement of student disciplinary records. There is a way that parents complain that you can do that, but it has to be after a while. Reports available must be kept confidential. See right here, FERPA again. All these rules, all of these regulations, all of these different policies, all these different ways to report. Here's how to categorize incidents, offenders, reporters, victims. You have to do all that. Entering participants in an incident, different people. Guidance on reporting behaviors. Entering behaviors. Reporting multiple behaviors. Violent crime definitions. They are pretty graphic, by the way. Can't say I didn't know, or I told you about underreporting. I've told you the story and I'll tell it again. I had a principal who reported assault without injury for a behavior mod technician over at the behavior school, public separate at Metro School. No, Morgan, excuse me, Morgan. Metro is public separate for EC. It's fair and profound. Right next door is Morgan School for behavior kids that are violent. BMT, they were wrestling with the kid. Somehow he tore his shoulder, about tore his arm off in the door. Two problems. A, the door had been broken. They knew it, hadn't reported it, hadn't got it fixed. He got his arm caught in the door, was out of work for 6 months, had multiple surgeries, and the principal reported it as a simple assault without injury. And And when I went and asked her about it, she said, well, he'll eventually get the use of his arm back, they think. I was like, this fits the definition of assault with injury. But I said, here's the bigger issue. When he filed his workman comp, he's not a salaried employee. He is an hourly employee. He's non-certified. When he filed his workman comp, his claim was denied because you said he wasn't hurt. Insurance won't pay. His workman comp claim has been denied, and his insurance won't pay because you reported this assault with no injury. Well, it was going to look bad. It was going to be one of them PD offenses, and it was going to hurt our numbers. That's not part of the determination, folks. They give you the definitions. You report what happened. She used to be principal at Morgan School. She voluntarily gave up her job. You can't come back from that. I can't fix that. I can't fix stupid. Boy, we got our pantsuit off on that one. It cost us a fortune. It cost us a fortune. But again, trying to keep her numbers down, not understanding that when you reported this as assault without injury, insurance didn't want to pay. Workman comp didn't want to pay. We've got no documentation that this man was hurt at work. He's just not coming to work, wants us to pay. Wants him, he might have hurt himself, on his own. We don't know. Principal said he wasn't hurt. That's correct. Yep. That only cost us $500,000. Only cost us a half. Yeah. Pocket change. You cost your district $500,000 on something that's as bad a PR move as this, you'd be lucky that all you lose is your house. If you're that dumb. But that's real, folks. That happened. That's what we're talking about here. This notion of underreporting, or all, you get buyer's remorse. You cool down, and after the heat of the moment, you go back and change it to something less because of that. What the fallout might be from it. Don't do that. Put it in as it's supposed to be. They have right here complete definitions of these things. They have complete. Go by them. Weapons related stuff. So I had a case where the principal didn't report a gun. Gun got back out, got home, and got used in a violent incident in the neighborhood, and was found out that the kid had the gun in school. The principal knew it. We talked about that last night. You can't take drugs and weapons off kids. Now you possess them. Now you're breaking the law. That safe harbor provision, even if that's in place, kid brings a gun to school and then he figures out he wasn't supposed to have it. He comes in and tells you. You call the resource officer. You don't send the kid home and hold it for him, then send it back home with him. You don't take it. I actually had that to happen. Now, that story got much worse, and I won't go through that tonight. Got much worse in that we had to let the principal go, and he committed suicide, by the way. Folks, I've had to deal with stuff that if I had hair, it'd fall out. Maybe that's why I don't have any. But it's all on this notion of not following the rules, not knowing the rules, not following the rules, trying to cover up, trying to protect somebody else's reputation or job. This bad PR for your area superintendent wants to be superintendent somewhere, or your district superintendent. Like if you're in the upstate of South Carolina, all them little districts they've got, they want to be, they want to be a big dog somewhere. And no, don't sacrifice your career for somebody else's. Don't do this. I won't report this incident because it's going to make us look bad, or it's going to hurt our numbers, and then the fallout that comes from that. Again, you got to be straight up, folks. And the way you be straight up is what the rules are. And here again is the manual. Back to our manual here. Gang activity, harassment, all these things are well spelled. Again, you notice there's not punishment in here. That's in your code of conduct. But this is all the stuff, and it tells you how to report it. Reporting assaults, all the different kind of assaults there are. You look at all the definitions here, folks. There's no way that you should ever misreport something as well detailed as they tell you everything and what to do and what not to do. It's all right here for you. Guidance on entering, guidance on reporting, entering, reporting in school suspensions, reporting out of school suspensions, how you go about doing all that. And I'll eventually get to zero tolerance. We talked about that, reporting those are illegal, and you have to report it on yourself if you do it. That's Office of Civil Rights. If you do seclusion or restraint illegally, you got to report that on yourself as well. Bus. Let me look at my time here, and I'll get on my bus rant last. That might last a while. I'll try to. All these scenarios, I love the scenarios they've got here in the back. But again, when we get here, alternate how you code and how you send kids to alternative programs, rosters, all these things, terms, definitions, and then we'll eventually get to site description, where it happened, participants, offender types. Do you just see student there? No. If it happened at your building, it could be unidentified. It could be just anybody else. It could be other. It could be a teacher. It could be even the school resource officer. There's 14 different, I said 15 a while ago, 14 or 15 different offender types that you could have. So remembering, if it happens in your building on your watch, you have to report it. And then here are all your stuff on your violent crimes, reportable offenses, and all those things. Now, and all of your ALP, all your alternative codes, all that stuff is in one handy dandy place for you. Now, my last rant of the evening. News came on in Charlotte. All these Hispanic parents lived in North Charlotte. Their kids all went to one middle school, which shall remain nameless, about all the bad things that were going on the school bus to their children of a sexual nature. And I don't mean just touching, folks. I mean the real deal stuff. Rape, sexual assault, sexual offense, the biggie, the big three. And they finally had gotten some community advocate, and the news media had got to them. And so I go over to that school and I said, you know, this is the third day we've been on the news on this. There must be blood. Somebody's going to have to go home. Why are y'all not reporting all this stuff that's going on the bus? And the principal's response was, we are. I've looked at your data. It's not there. Oh, yeah, sure it is. Let me show you. Bus misbehavior. What? Well, it happened on the bus, so it's just bus misbehavior. A rape that occurs on a school bus is not bus misbehavior. That's jumping seats or sticking your head out the window. A rape is a rape, whether it happened in the bathroom, in a classroom, or on a bus. Oh no, that's not how that's not our determination. Did you not read this manual? Well, yeah, but we don't agree with that. Not only did we fire him, I say we, that'd be me. I made sure he never worked in school ever again in his life. I had his license pulled. But that was he was hiding everything under bus misbehavior. We determined that 8 girls had been sexually assaulted or raped over a period of about 3 months. Folks, we trade on our credibility, our honor, our ethics in this business. What do you think that community felt about us after that? You got to play it straight up. You say, well, but I may lose my job if I report all this stuff straight up. Well, yeah, you might. But if you'll get out and work and understand what you're doing, if you'll process your discipline, pay attention, stop the little things from becoming the big things. You got a shot at pulling yourself through this. But you get caught doing any of this stuff, folks, as I showed you, that case in Bellingham, Washington, just not reporting, they've been charged criminally now. Those people, I'm telling you right now, I believe that they'll serve jail time. I believe that they'll serve jail time over that. But something like this, with the rules in place now, that principal was lucky that the rules that are in place now weren't in place then, or he'd have been in prison. I can tell you that right now. He would have been in prison. He was intentionally covering up violent crimes, intentionally. Now, I know none of you folks would do that, but the whole point of the night is due process is hard. It's long. There's a lot of pieces. The reporting piece, bad things happen to good people at schools. There are ways that you can try to negate that. Cheating is not the way. That was the whole point of the antecedent behaviors. That's why I presented it to the state, and that's why we worked it in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The answer is not to hide it, to lie about it, to misreport it. We have help, we have support. We'll come out and support you, but you can't allow this stuff to happen. Schools can't be places where people get victimized. It's about, it's about doing the right thing. So in the end, it's about doing the right thing. We have to be honorable. We trade on our honor, our reputation, our ethical concern. Remember those 4 paradigms of ethics? That's what we trade on in this business. That is our stock and trade. That has to be who we are. And if not, it just vaporizes. It goes away. We're struggling with market share now. External forces in public schools, and a lot of it is self-inflicted. I will not blame charters and privates. There's a lot of good people in those, but a lot of this is self-inflicted because people have been looking out for themselves and not the kids. They've been champions for themselves and for teachers and not for kids. That's what it all circles back to. If you're a champion for kids, you don't want these things to happen. You want to try to prevent them from happening. All right. That was the last rant of the evening. Look at me, right on time. Oh, I went 2 minutes over tonight. That's not bad for me. All right. Questions you have for me? Your work's great. Everything's going good. Nobody's behind. If I wouldn't encourage you, if you've not already, I wouldn't encourage you to start the CAP now because you can't get any qualitative. There's nobody to interview or observe. That's task 2 of the CAP. You got all fall to do just the CAP, and the SOP. SOP doesn't take long because it's just a copy and paste. Work on your competency folio. You could knock that out. Work on your hours. Make sure you get both of your evidences in the OMA and the SCIP. Don't worry about the CAP if you haven't already started it. Again, you can't get any interviews or observations. You get stoned you get stopped at 2. Because the whole point of the CAP is to talk and interview people in task 2. That's the important task. What can we do to fix this? Without anybody to talk to or to interview or to observe, it really doesn't go. So if you hadn't already started, don't worry about it. Work on your competency folio. Y'all been doing a good job on those. I've been looking at a lot of those. I really like the stuff that you're doing on your competency folios. It's really good. Work on your hours. Remember, if you get your hours this summer, you can go ahead and start them for the fall. Because you got to get 200 in the fall, and you know how hard it's going to be, with school starting back and all those kind of that stuff. So, and again, you never know. Life just jumps up and grabs you. Get ahead if you can. Always, school administration. If you get behind, you never get caught up. Let me say that again. That might be the most relevant thing I've said all night. In school administration, there is no catching up. If you get behind, you are behind. You will never get caught up. So if you can get ahead on some of those things, that would be great this summer. But I'm very pleased with your work. I'm looking forward to your case studies next week. Anybody have anything for the good of the group tonight? I appreciate you being with me. I'll stop.
Book list for next fall. Book list.
It'll be. Let me share my screen. It'll be the same. Let me go back to my content. North House and Glickman, basic guide to supervision. It'll be the same. That's the only 2 you need right there. I don't know what Bulldog Bundle's trying to charge you for those.
$195.
Well, let's see what they cost.
I was going to hit Amazon after this.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I'd do. Okay, that's it right there. Buy it there for $45. Let's see. Amazon, this is the old one. Is that the new one? This is the one we want right here. Amazon, that's second edition. Which edition was this one? Third edition. There we go. That's the third. Is there a fourth edition? Let's see. What edition is this one? Oh, that's the international edition. I think that anyway, you can see, I believe that that one runs between that one runs between $45 and say $65. So we'll say $75 just to be. All right, let's see what the other one. I know North House is not that expensive. I mean, North House is like $20. I think this is the one we use right here. Let's see how much it is. Buy it used for $13.
Oh, that's easy.
I mean, just those two. So I don't think I would be paying more than $100. Get that out of the way.
Um, Even though I'm moving schools, could I still do my cap from RS Central since all my other stuff was RS Central?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the last one you're going to collect any data. Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I can email them and go if I need to go over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, I would. Yeah. Now, if you have to, the rule is they have to, and evidence has to come from the same school. You can't have like task one from one school and task two from another. But now you can have, if you have to, you can have your cap from a different school, but it's got to be the whole thing.
Okay.
And Dr. Lamb, I want to make sure you said, now I did have a group of people that I could interview for the cap. So
Yeah.
I got data.
If you've got them, then you're good.
Okay.
The problem is if you start looking for them now and you can't find anybody, you can't fake that. That's the
Right.
whole point of the cap. We already know what the teacher working condition survey said in those 5 areas. You know, when you go to the cap, you're supposed to look at time, facilities, resources, teacher empowerment, school and school empowerment, school leadership, teacher leadership, school leadership, those 5 areas. We've already got the data, and it's actually fresh in North Carolina. It's always fresh in South Carolina because they do theirs every year. North Carolina does it every other year, but they did it this spring. It's already been released. We know what the numbers say. We just reconfirm them on the items in each of those 5 areas that are the lowest. We just, is this really real, or you just matched principle the day you took this survey? And then the whole point of the cap is task 2, where you go out there and you say, this is why what the TWC says, or the teacher survey in South Carolina says. Why is it this way? What can we do to fix it? Because it's all about that set of recommendations at the end. That's the whole idea. And they're not based. I mean, if we're just going to make recommendations, we could just make them off of the survey results. But again, remembering time, our best example of time where we go wrong, where we hit it 20 yards further in the woods than we could our old driver. doesn't, on time. Teachers always say, don't have enough planning time. If we just took it at face value, we'd say we need to add more to the master schedule. Well, we know that doesn't work because it blows our class sizes up. But even if we did that and we go talk to them, they say, oh, we got plenty in the schedule. We just never get to take it because we're covering classes. So the fix is not add more planning time into the schedule. The fix is hire substitutes so they can take what they've already got. But you don't know that unless you go talk to people. That's the whole notion. We already know what they said on the survey. We reconfirm it on the needs assessment. But really the gold, the GOLD, the good stuff from the CAP is when we go talk to people. We do that qualitative. And it says that to task 2. This is qualitative. We need for you to go out and start learning that, if you want to improve your school culture and climate, that's what the CAP is about. You got to talk to people. You can't just take the survey at face value and then never respond to it or never do anything. You need to go talk to the people in your building. Culture is hard, but you can't do it from your office. Culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning. School culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning. If you can have all the strategy in the world, but if your culture is bad, and that's why we talk about, it's a cultural thing to make sure that you use those teacher work days. Those required days go over your handbook. Those days that the beginning teachers have to come there on work days because they don't have annual leave days. That's when you need to be working with them on classroom management, how to write referrals. That's culture. That's exactly what that is. We have a way that we do things around here. We do things the right way. It's culture. Reporting correctly is culture. All these things that I talked to you about in the end are about culture. We do things the right way. We're ethical. We're honest. We're reliable. We do the right thing. That's culture. That's culture. But you can't do culture from a survey. You got to talk to people. You got to observe people. You got to get down in the weeds with it. But if you've got somebody that you can talk to, some people that you can get some feedback and some recommendations from, yes. But if you can't, don't attempt it, because that's the whole purpose of the CAP. You're missing the whole benefit of doing it, which is getting out there and talking to people. Again, think about all the activities I've had you doing this summer in 603, all this coming and going to and for. It's about culture. You go talk to people about this stuff. You talk to your AP about this. You got to get in the habit of talking with people and making that personal connection. That's what builds culture in your building. That's the whole notion here. I come on here every week and talk to y'all. We have a conversation. Mostly I just rant, throw stuff. But that it's culture. I'm trying poorly, I know. Don't tease me too much. I'm trying to get you to understand that leadership is a conversation. That's what culture is. It's a conversation. We value you and what you have to say. I mean, I could just send you the PowerPoints. I'm not going to sit and read them to you. I could just send them to you. I've got them posted in Blackboard. We could just show up at the end of, but leadership's a conversation, folks. Leadership, culture is a conversation. The CAP is really about task 2. It's really about task 2. Just like, the OMA is about task 3, that master schedule. SKIP's about, about that marketing plan and those resources it takes to pull it off. You can pick out, there's one thing in each of these evidences that's really what we want you to take away from it, the important part of building culture and building a strong leadership base in your building. It's task 2 of the CAP. That's the important. All right. What's next? All right. I'm looking forward to case study 3 next week. Everybody have a good week. I appreciate you. Good night.